They are descriptions of pain, and they're metaphors. So this one says, my organs feel like they're being ripped and cut open without anesthesia. Muscle aches like I did a heavy workout. These are quotes from different women about the pain that their body experiences. And they're just layered on exam room paper. Yeah, I've just stitched in it. So thinking about the way that we stitch and suture the body, like paired different text and like different imagery, like sewed in to the book. But I think for me, it really begins in the pottery studio of a local pottery place in Charlotte. I rented a studio space there after I took a ceramic class, and it was really cheap, and I wanted to try something new I wasn't good at, and I just started taking ceramics, and it took one class, and then I just bought a bunch of clay, and I had access to the shop, and I started making pots, but mostly just hand building weird abstract things. And there was this older man named Max who worked out of that studio space. He was an architect who had retired, and he also was a ceramist artist. And he took the time every time I was in there and he was there to talk to me about my ideas. He encouraged me to take other types of art classes, so I signed up for a darkroom class at a nonprofit in town. I was 22, 23 when I started taking darkroom classes. And I signed up for my first darkroom class, and then I got gifted a scholarship, and I was able to take 6 more in a row. And they were, it was unattainable for me. It was $300 or $400 for 6 weeks of classes, and so it was something I couldn't afford, but a very generous person was paying for me to be there, and I just kept taking classes for 2 years, almost a year and a half, 2 years. I took darkroom classes every week, and I was there, and I'd go on my own time, weekends, and use the darkroom and process my film and print my photos, and I met my now long-standing mentor, Carolyn Demerit. And so I talked to Carolyn, and I asked her, I was like, what can I do to do what you do, to teach art? Because this was so impactful for me. And she's like, well, you need to go get your MFA. And I knew nothing about art. And so I said, if I want to make art, I need to know who has made art before me. So I decided to get a degree in art history.
Oh, wow.
So I got my undergraduate degree in art history. It was art history, so there was no studio art focus at all. There were no studio art classes required for my major, and art history students were not allowed to take studio classes. My advisor looked the other way when she saw those classes she was like, you're not allowed to be in these classes. So my art practice happened entirely outside of formal education. It happened through my mentorship with Carolyn. My very first truly in my mind studio art classes when I started here. Very first critique ever was here in graduate school. I had never had a critique formally before. So these were experiences that were very fresh and new to me, being in this world, speaking this language, interacting with people who weren't photographers. Sometimes I compare it to feeling when I got here, feeling like this, it's not a class barrier, but this chasm of not speaking the language in the same way that made me feel like I didn't have the language for painting. I didn't have the language for drawing, how to talk about those things. So prior to coming to UConn, I had many opportunities to show out of state, in big galleries, solo shows. I got a contract for a museum show that's going to happen in a couple years when I graduate. Outside of this world in UConn, my work seems to have those kinds of recognition. It probably does the best job it can. I think that the market, we're constantly told by faculty that the market is really bad for jobs, that there are very limited tenure track positions. I went to a conference last year for photography called Society for Photographic Education, and I went to several panels of different people talking about how difficult it is. I think a lot of the dysfunction of the art world that makes me feel like I can't be my best self comes from a lot of ego and a lot of just certain traditions that have been followed forever in the art world that I don't think I can engage in, right? I'm never going to think that pushing someone else down is going to make my work or my research or me as an artist better. But a lot of art worlds function that way. It's not supportive and community focused. It's very much, you have to be willing to sacrifice everything for you. And I'm not willing to sacrifice my relationships, my mental health, all of that for my career. And so museums, I think, are those spaces for me. And I think also galleries that function as community art institutions, whether they're run entirely by artists for artists, or they have grants or other kinds of funding that help sustain them. And then some galleries who engage in like political or activism discourse, and not galleries that are afraid of engaging in those spaces or find that their markets are not for those spaces. So maybe I need to be at a community college or teaching art for high schoolers, or working in art management, or as in some kind of curator installation position at a museum. There are many ways you can have a career in the arts, but in the stage and the climate and the world that we're at, where arts are already the smallest piece of the pie, I think, and they keep getting squashed and cut in funding, those opportunities for jobs become smaller and smaller, and the pool of applicants becomes larger and larger. So I would be okay if I worked a 9-to-5 that was not art, and I taught art, at a nonprofit, like the darkroom class I took, once a week. I taught darkroom at a nonprofit. I would be very happy with that. So I grew up in a religious fundamentalist cult extremist, belief, and I wasn't allowed to go to college or school, and I grew up with these ideologies that are being pushed nationally, politically right now, right? This idea that women shouldn't have access to birth control, that they should not have autonomy over their decisions in their body, that I didn't believe women should vote, any kind of voice, that those all things were deferred to, just extreme patriarchy, right? And so I think when I started the catalyst that launched me out of that and started with this process of coming out of my faith experience, made me interested in certain topics. I think maybe gave me a proclivity to certain topics that I investigate in my research and in my work. So I know that those things factor into my identity as well, and just always knowing that there should be a safety net and an egg basket that you should rely on. What other could my 9-to-5 be if this art market is not as tenable a place for a career? My work is based in the American Gynecology archives and activating them through social practice and installation, text, imagery, interdisciplinary art or practice entirely. My interest in it began, I think, partially because of my background, right? And feeling like there were many opportunities. I also have been diagnosed with endometriosis and had many extended experiences with gynecologists through that period of time. I think I started with a body of work about that experience, and I photographed gynecology instruments, and then it kind of sent me on this vein of research about the story of American gynecology and how we got to where we are, and why our experiences in doctors' offices feel the way that they do, and how they don't need to feel that way. Yeah, so I made the big piece that's behind you out of medical exam paper. I made 3 pieces like that, different sizes, but that's the largest of them. Out of medical exam room squares, like this. I cut and sewed with the sewing machine, which was a really interesting experience. I'm working on these x-rays. These are x-ray boxes from doctor's offices. They're old and they don't always turn on right away. So let's see if I can get them to turn on. There we go. And these are tests right now. I'm going to work to make them full scale. So there'll be 1 per box, and they'll be the size of the box. So I presented this to my committee and to midterms to kind of get some feedback on. But idea of using the x-ray box as a way to see things that you can't see, right? When the light is off over here, you can't see, but when you turn the light on, you can. And so using this as visually a conceptual piece to take the research that I've been reading and living, and to turn it into a full salon wall style. So there'll be 10, 12, 14 boxes, each with a different set of imagery or text on them to display the work that my research, I read so much, and I pull from archive, I pull from stories, I pull from imagery and text. I've been making a lot of books lately. There's a bunch we can look at outside the studio that I think will be instrumental to my practice. I don't know how I have not been making books, and I probably will always be. I will always be an artist and working and making my art. And I think that if I have opportunities to show my art a few times a year, if I have opportunities to get a grant or a residency, or to keep moving my research, which has become, and my practice, which has become so entwined with social practice and activism, then if I have outlets for those, I feel a few times a year, I feel like that would be success for me. And if I find a place I can land where I can teach art or work in some art capacity full time and still feel like my best self with my full mental health, then that would be great too. They're all from let's see, I want to make sure I get his name right. The Story of My Life, an autobiography written by Dr. J. Marion Sims, the father of American gynecology. So this one says, there was investigating the female fate, which I had not sought. And then his quote reads, if there was anything I hated, it was investigating the organs of the female pelvis, but fate had in store for me a work which I had not sought. So day after day, again and again, and the examiner paper kind of separates. I operated, and I failed, and I failed, and I failed. But I persevered, and there's an image of his hands holding the speculum he designed. Convinced that success must come in the end. And then here, the block quotes separate. These women carried the burden, but if you read the non-block text, it writes, they depended on me utterly. These women did not complain. I had no one to help me. I alone carried the burden of success or failure. But reality, they did. They carried the burden because they were operated on. And then the last sentence, she willingly consented, at the end of the book.